Hey, true crime fanatics, this is Claire.
And I'm Andy.
You're tuned in to the Homicide Hobbies podcast, which is a podcast for people who love to hear about the horrendous crimes that people commit. Enjoy.
Is you ready?
Been waiting on you. Where and when?
Our when is the late 1980s to 1992-ish. That's when our crimes take place. Our where is Canada. So a trigger-ish. This guy really likes to shove his penis places. It's not wanted. So there's lots of raping, and he's really into violent anal sex. So prepare for that. Our who is actually two son bitches this week. We've got Canadian killers, Karla, Leanne, Homolka, and Paul Bernardo. They were dubbed the Ken and Barbie Killers. They were both extremely well liked and fairly attractive individuals, which we have learned not all ugly people are serial killers. They can be pretty too.
I would say rather than not all ugly people are serial killers, the other way around.
Not all serial
killers are ugly, because just being ugly doesn't mean you're a murderer at all. But turns out some of the serial killers can be lookers, which, all right. I feel like it's more likely they're good looking because they can get by because they're
However, we have seen several times over that
they've got a divot.
No, but if you're standing there and you see a creepy person that's not very attractive just standing there versus an attractive person that's standing there staring at you, you're more likely to be like, oh, he's checking me out, versus, ew, why are you looking at me?
Why are you drooling? Shut your jaw. Get your hand out of your trousers.
Anyway, so
we can see that.
So fun fact time. Karla, later after being arrested, would score a 5 out of 40 on the psychopathy checklist. And Paul would score a 35 out of 40. So
you said 5 out of 40 for her?
Yeah. Karla was evaluated by several forensic psychologists. One of those forensic psychologists would diagnose Karla as a classic example of hyperboreophilia, which, more fun fact time, that is when it's an individual who's aroused by a partner's violent sexual behavior. So Karla was turned on by Paul. Well, she was turned on by Paul's violent sexual behavior. So these two kind of remind me of the case you did on Fred and Rosemary West. And for those that don't know, that's our Wicked Witch. It's titled Wicked Witch of the West and Her Moron Sidekick from our season 1, episodes 14 and 15. Give them a listen if you haven't. The only difference between Fred and Rosemary and Karla and Paul, in my opinion,
Rosemary was the ringleader.
Yes. And Karla and Paul are on a lesser scale solely because their body count wasn't as close to the West.
And they weren't related to them.
Well, yeah, but yeah. So a little about Karla. She was born May 4th, 1970 in Ontario, Canada. She had 2 sisters, Tammy and Lori. They were younger. She was well liked, pretty.
So you said, hold up. So you said all of this is in Canada? Maybe since you said the 80s into the 90s, right? Maybe that's the delayed 70s for Canada.
It's entirely possible. Karla was well liked. Everybody, people liked her.
Got it.
But nobody knew she had a slightly dark side. Paul, he was born August 27th. 1964, also in Ontario. He's the third and youngest biological child of his parents. Paul's father, Kenneth, would sexually abuse Paul's older sister, Deborah, in front of the other family members.
Ew.
Yep. And
hold up.
That wonderful father of the year, Kenneth, is eventually charged with crimes involving voyeurism, which, as we've said in other cases, it's people that like to watch people have sex. Yes.
You said he's one of 3 biological children. Do they have adopted children?
No,
weird
it's a paternity. In in a second you'll understand, because there is a paternity situation. So Kenneth is eventually charged with crimes involving voyeurism and pedophilia. Paul's mother, her name's Marilyn, she suffered from depression. Can't imagine why. And also agoraphobia, which, for those that don't know, it's a mental and behavioral disorder, specifically an anxiety disorder characterized by symptoms of anxiety in situations where the person perceives their environment to be unsafe with no easy way to escape. So feeling trapped. And those people generally lock themselves in the houses and don't ever come out. And Marilyn eventually moves down into the basement of her family's home. So
that's trapped.
Right? But it's her own choosing to do it, and it's her own surroundings, and like
there's limited exits.
But I can't imagine there's also limited entrances, and feeling like you don't have control of your environment, considering her husband is violent and also sexually abusing their daughter, and there isn't much she can do about it. I can't imagine why she would feel depressed and trapped. You know? So Paul somehow seems to be like people that know him, he appears to be a happy, well-adjusted child, but deep down, he was not right in the head. He was infatuated with starting fires at a young age. And you know how people ask when you're a kid, or if you have kids, you ask them, what do you want to be when you grow up?
Mm-hmm.
As a young preteen, you know what Paul said he wanted to be?
A fire starter.
He dreamed of, I promise you this is a quote, okay? He dreamed of creating a virgin farm where he would breed virgin girls so he could rape them.
I think somebody needs to explain to him what the words mean.
I was just like, if I asked one of my children, what do you want to be when you grow up? And they were like, I want to be a virgin farmer. And I was like, I'd be like, what? I want to breed virgins so that I can rape them. But anyway, in 1981, Paul was six. He was a preteen, so I would guess somewhere around 12. But mind you, he's growing up watching his father rape his sister. So he is being exposed to some very violent sexual situations. In 1981, Paul was 16. Him and his mother, Marilyn, got into a huge fight where she told Paul his father was not his father. She claimed she had an affair, and Paul was the result of said affair. This obviously was a super healthy way to discuss major life events. And Paul, from that point on, would call his mother a slut and a whore. And she would respond to Paul with, "You're a bastard from hell." So, healthy relationship. Fast forward, Paul goes off to college the following year, so 1982. He attended the University of Toronto, Scarborough. Fun fact time. The University of Toronto is also where another notorious Canadian murderer, Russell Williams, was coincidentally attending. But Russell was 2 years behind our sumbitch Paul. So, I don't know what's going on in the University of Toronto, but 2 serial killers at the same time seems a bit scarring.
I know this is getting slightly off topic, but I think it's crazy how often those kind of people find each other.
So they don't find each other, they just happen to go to the same school.
They still manage to connect of some sort.
Oh, yeah.
But magnets out in the world, that they are drawn to each other in some weird way.
Yeah, it's insane. Now, when Paul was in college...
Maybe they put off a smell.
I have no response to that.
Clearly, I could tell with your silence, but think about it. Maybe it's just like, you know how when ants can pick up things, something that you're not aware of? I don't know. You need to study that.
Sure.
They already know that their brains fire different.
That's true.
So maybe they're firing different because they're picking up weird smells.
So while Paul was in college, Paul would get mad at girlfriends, and he would set fire to the things he had access to. So he never really outgrew that whole fire stage.
Sounds healthy.
Him and his buddies would be what I would consider typical college males, and they would go to bars to try to pick up girls, and they were usually successful because they were attractive. Paul, though, enjoyed humiliating his dates in public and would engage in aggressive anal intercourse in bed without the consent of the women. So,
did he know, though?
I feel like he did.
You don't know. Maybe he had eyeball trouble. The lights were out, and he just got frustrated. And
so I think because it started off as consensual sex, and as we've discussed in the past, because the rapists enjoy the lack of pleasure that they're inflicting on their victim, that by sticking it in their ass and them flailing and him having to subdue them to continue to do what he's doing, I think that's where he was kind of getting his rocks off. That makes sense.
Yeah.
But his relationships obviously became increasingly more violent and unstable, and each of these women were threatened with death if they told anyone about what he was doing to them. And then in 1986, 2 of the women had Paul served with restraining orders. And then after graduation, he went to work as a very successful salesman for Amway. Okay, so now we're going to get into Paul's timeline. Okay, and because they are rape victims and they do survive, there are no names and there's limited details. So I'm going to give you the dates and ages and more or less like just the timeline of Paul's extracurriculars up until he meets his future wife, Karla. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure there's more women out there that I am not going to be able to list, because the more I researched this guy, the more victims I found. And it blew my mind.
So these rape victims, they come forward after he's arrested, or is he charged during these time frames? That's where you know the dates and he's like released.
They come forward after they're raped, but they don't know him. So they just know they have a serial rapist out there and they're trying to track him down. I don't know if that really answers your question. He doesn't get caught until he's caught, if that makes sense. So all of these women, and as you're about to hear, they are back to back. Like the first 2 are 10 days apart. And again, I like my timelines. So to start off, we've got May 4th, 1987. Paul raped a 21-year-old Scarborough woman in front of her parents' house for an hour. Like, just in the front yard. Raped this girl. May 14th, 1987, he raped a 19-year-old woman in the backyard of her parents' house. July 17th, 1987, he unsuccessfully tried to rape a young woman. And although he beat the victim, Paul gave up on raping her when she hit him back. So he was at least unsuccessful with that. Good on her.
He didn't like to play that game.
Yeah, that was too rough. He only likes to be the one doing the hittings. September 29th, 1987, Paul attempted to rape a 15-year-old girl. He broke into the victim's house and entered her bedroom. He jumped on her back, put his hand over her mouth, threatened her with a knife, hit her across the side of the face, and bit her ear. Paul fled when the victim's mother entered the room and started screaming. A man named Anthony Hainmeyer was wrongfully convicted of the assault 2 years later and served an entire 16-month prison sentence, but was later exonerated after Paul admitted to the crime 2 decades later in 2006. How messed up is that? That brings this lovely feller to October 1987, when Karla and Paul meet at a hotel restaurant. She was 17 years old at the time and working as a volunteer at an animal hospital, and Paul was 23. Paul kept his Pepe to himself at least only for him and Karla to play with, because she also enjoyed the rough sex. So from October to December, Paul was satisfied by his relationship. What's up?
Is that when they started their relationship, was in October, or when he was raping the other gals they were dating?
They started dating pretty much as soon as they met because they were very attracted to each other. From the time they met to December, so October, November, and December, the rapings, as far as they are aware, kind of died down because she enjoyed getting it rough. So
perfect pair.
Some of these Karla was a participant in. I'm not sure which ones until later. By December 16th, 1987, Paul raped a 15-year-old girl. The next day, the Toronto Police Service issued a warning to women in the Scarborough area that were traveling alone at night, especially those taking public transportation, because Paul preyed on girls that were waiting at like the bus enclosures that keep you protected from the weather. Mm-hmm. That's where he liked to grab them from. December 23rd, 1987, he raped a 17-year-old girl. He used a knife to threaten his victims. At this point, he became known in the media as the Scarborough Rapist. And April 18th, I think that there were some other things going on because that's a long span. And as we've seen, he seems to be on an every 10-day track of raping someone. So to go from December to April, I think there's others in there. But December 18th, 1988, he attacked another girl. She was 17. May 27th, 1988, Paul was nearly caught by a police officer that was staking out a bus shelter. Even though the officer saw Paul hiding under a tree and chased after him on foot, somehow Paul managed to escape. 5 days later, May 30th, 1988, Paul realized the police were onto him. Huh?
What made them chase after him?
So at this point, there's been a number of girls raped, and one of the common denominators are that a lot of these girls have been assaulted waiting at a bus stop. So the police are just kind of, when they're out doing their patrols, keeping an extra eye on those bus shelters. And the officer saw a man hiding under the trees and probably did like a, hey, come here. And Paul took off and the officer chased him, but Paul managed to escape. Since Paul realized police were onto his shenanigans and staking out his favorite pickup spots, he decided to drive 25 miles or 40 kilometers, whatever, southwest, where he managed to rape an 18-year-old girl. October 4th, 1988, he attempted to rape another woman in Scarborough, but she fought Paul. Paul stabbed his intended rape victim twice, once in her thigh and once in her butt, which required 12 stitches to fix. Yeah. On November 16th, 1988, he raped an 18-year-old woman in the backyard of her parents' house. November 17th, 1988, the police finally form a task force to try to capture the Scarborough Rapist. December 27th, 1988, he tried to rape another woman, but a neighbor chased Paul off. By 1989, now keep in mind, this whole time, he's dating Karla.
He's got a girlfriend?
Yeah.
And he doesn't scare easy.
No, he sure doesn't. By 1989, Karla and Paul are engaged. June 20th, 1989, this rapist attempted to rape another young woman, but she too fought back. This young woman's screams alerted neighbors, and Paul scurried off with scratches across his face. August 15th, 1989, Paul successfully raped a 22-year-old woman. November 21st, 1989, he raped a 15-year-old girl that, again, he saw waiting at a bus shelter. December 22nd, 1989, he raped another 19-year-old girl. May 26th, 1990, there was a rape of a 19-year-old woman. The victim's vivid recollection of her attacker made it to where police were able to create a computer composite of her attacker, and they released that to the media and surrounding areas to try to track Paul down. In June 1990, a 22-year-old woman named Elizabeth Bain went missing from Toronto University. This woman going missing, her boyfriend was sentenced for the crime, but a massive amount of evidence would point at the Scarborough Rapist because it fits his MO. He's driving her, like, the way she went missing, it fit, but the police liked her boyfriend for the crime, even though there was no evidence that it was him. And more evidence pointing that it was Paul as the true perpetrator. was the fact that there was an ex-girlfriend of Paul's that came forward to police and said she knew that Paul had a violent streak and he had previously met Elizabeth. So that connects Paul to this girl that's gone missing. But they figured that this was a girlfriend that was scorned and just kind of wrote her off. Later, after Paul's captured, decades later, they find receipts in Paul's possession, putting him in the neighborhood at the time that Elizabeth had gone missing, and he knew her. And they also have eyewitnesses at the time that described a man who looked just like Paul or their Scarborough Rapist. But either way you slice it, Elizabeth, her body has never been found. Elizabeth's boyfriend, claiming he didn't hurt her, was thrown in jail and arrested for her murder. He took a plea deal because they offered him 8 years because they have no body. They have no actual proof that she's been murdered.
So why did
she's
he plead guilty?
Because he was scared and was being threatened with more, if that makes sense. So he pled guilty. And
if they've got nothing to say that she was murdered or that he was,
I think he was young and scared. But he pled guilty and was sentenced to 8 years for her murder in 1990. In 2008, he was exonerated for her murder and had that wiped from his record because...
From when to when?
1990 to 2008, but he only did 8 years, so he was out in 1998 or 1999. He spent 10 years trying to prove it wasn't him. And then as the police dug further into it, they realized, oh shit, it probably was Paul, because they have stuff that actually connected him to Elizabeth going missing. So I think the officers that were investigating Elizabeth just got it, kind of had it be in their bonnet and decided that the boyfriend is the one that did it.
Usually it is, though.
Right. But that's why. But at the same time, I've listed a lot of women in the same area that have gone missing or been raped. But, well, actually, they haven't gone missing. They've just been raped. So.
Right. But this is out of the 70s when just their southern country there has lots of women going missing pretty regular, and they're actually dead. I don't want to say it happens, but I feel like when you're dealing in a lot of cities, it's still a small number with how many people live there.
Well, that brings us to, that was June 1990. July 1990, 2 months after police received tips that Paul resembled the Scarborough Rapist composite, he was interviewed by police. He told the officers when they were like, why do you think we brought you in? He's like, because I look like the sketches. I'm not going to deny it. But because he was so calm and cool and chatty, and he was well-liked and well-received by the officers, and he provided DNA samples to the officers along with 120 other men. You know what happens? They were like, you know what? He offered the samples. He's cool. He's nice. It's not him. So his DNA samples don't get tested. They just get shoved off to the side. Any guesses as to what happens next?
They all die.
Paul gets fired from his Amway job for smuggling cigarettes across the U.S.-Canadian border. So now
how much are cigarettes? What's I imagine they're pricier, huh?
I don't know. But since he's fired and unemployed, he started hanging out quite regularly with Karla's family because, again, he's got a girlfriend. He becomes obsessed with his fiance's little sister, Tammy. So obsessed that he would watch her through her bedroom window and then would stand in her bedroom and masturbate while she slept. He was able to get into Tammy's bedroom because Karla broke the lock on the windows so Paul could crawl in.
What?
If I had a boyfriend that became obsessed with you or our younger sister and was like, hey, can you like jimmy that lock for me so that I can crawl in and masturbate to your sister sleeping? I'd be like, no, that's weird. Get the fuck out of here. Don't call me again. But that's not what Karla did. She broke the locks so he could get in. Before they're married, Karla wanted to give her fiancé a special gift. She loved him so much, she wanted to give him her virginity. But she wasn't a virgin. So she decided...
And he's probably real excited at that because he didn't get to live out his farming dreams.
Yeah, but she's not a virgin. So Karla was like, I want to give him a virginity, but I don't got mine no more. So she decided to give her 15-year-old sister Tammy to Paul. Paul, by the way, had expressed to Karla that he was sexually attracted to her little sister. So Karla hatched her a plan to help Paul rape her 15-year-old sister. In July, Paul and Karla served
little sister.
In July, Paul and Karla served Tammy a spaghetti dinner spiked with Valium that she stole from the animal hospital where she worked. Paul began to rape Tammy for about a minute before she started to wake up and he had to hurry up and finish. I think he stuck it in her ass because I'll explain more so in a second.
You like honeys?
Well, I know he does.
Well, but what's the point of having sex with a virgin then?
So, spoiler alert, because he had to stop raping her, he rapes her again in a second. I'm about to tell you about that. And
same night?
He was 6 months later. He was disappointed when he stuck it in her vagina and realized she was not a virgin. So that tells me that I think the first time he tried to rape her, he stuck it in her ass, which is what made her start to wake up.
Well, she's drugged, so I don't think him putting it in her ass would have been like the smelling salts that woke her up. I feel like they didn't drug her right.
That's entirely possible, but he would have known then that she wasn't a virgin anymore. So when he rapes her a second time here in a second that I'm about to tell you about, he wouldn't have been
Or maybe
disappointed.
He's stupid and figured since he didn't finish, it didn't count.
He did finish. He just made it real quick. So Karla, okay, so let's pretend like you don't know that he raped her a second time. So he raped her the first time in under a minute because she started to wake up. Karla,
he wanted it to last longer.
Karla stole an anesthetic agent from the hospital, halothane.
Sounds right.
I'm probably saying it wrong, but it's an anesthetic.
Turns out they don't dispense that in the pharmacy.
Well, you worked at an animal shelter, so I don't know.
An animal shelter? We weren't anesthetizing anybody.
Okay,
we were trying to get him adopted out.
Well, she done stole the anesthetic, and if I'm saying it wrong, my bad. As Dave pointed out before, I ain't so good with the readings, but
she stole some sleepy potion that was used there before on the animals to use on her sister, which, by the way, again, it's real fucked up to help multiple times having your sister be raped.
Right. So that was
I don't know what's wrong. I don't know what's wrong with her brain hole that if she's not aware of it, it's okay kind of mentality.
She wanted to keep it in the family, which is sick.
Mm-hmm.
But the first time they tried to rape her, that was in July. So now on December 23rd, 1990, 6 months before Paul and Karla's wedding date, after a Christmas party at Karla's family home, Paul and Karla drugged Tammy again, but this time they put sleeping pills in a rum and eggnog concoction. Once Tammy was unconscious, Karla and Paul stripped her naked. Karla placed the halothane. She soaked it on a cloth and put it over her sister's nose and mouth. So I think it was kind of like a chloroform type situation.
Yeah.
And yeah. With Karla's parents asleep upstairs, this demented couple broke out the videotape and recorded themselves as they successfully raped Tammy while she was unconscious. Tammy began choking on her own vomit. However, before calling 911, Paul and Tammy hid the evidence. They did the laundry. They redressed Tammy, who, by the way, had chemical burns from them putting that cloth over her face. They moved her into her basement bedroom, and a few hours later, not a few minutes, but a few hours later, when 911 came out, Tammy was pronounced dead at St. Catherine's General Hospital without ever having regained consciousness. Paul had told police that he had unsuccessfully tried to revive her, and her death was ruled an accident. After Tammy's
How
death...
was it an accident?
I don't know. Like, the coroner just went along with the couple's story, even though the parents saw Paul and Tammy vacuuming and cleaning the basement in the middle of the night. That doesn't even make sense to me. But I guess it was just one of those situations, as Jason likes to call them, where it was just too bad to be true, that her parents didn't want to believe that they had anything to do with it. If she was dying in her bed, how did they know?
Well, you wouldn't want to believe your child participated in your other child's death.
Right. So,
although I feel like a child willingly cleaning in the middle of the night is suspicious enough.
Right. Well, and she's like 20 at this point. 19.
I can tell you, even if I was asleep and Dave got the vacuum out and was vacuuming at 1 a.m. or midnight or 11, really, any time at night, if he's vacuuming, I would assume something happened. Like what broke
right?
Or what spilt. And if there's a dead body, I wouldn't believe it's not an accident.
Right. Like, no. You don't start, kind of like your feller last week. You don't start doing or whenever it was, you don't start doing the cleanings after somebody's found unconscious. That's not what you do. Here, let me put this dish in the dishwasher. But the coroner ruled it an accident. Ignore the chemical burns on her face. That's fine. I guess it was just some really strong rum in her eggnog. But after Tammy's death, Paul and Karla videotaped themselves again having rough sex on Tammy's bed while Karla was dressed in Tammy's clothes, pretending to be Tammy, so Paul could pretend to have Tammy one last time.
What?
Yeah.
When was his head injury? Or
no
hers?
head injury. They're just sick and twisted.
Does he also sedate her so he can pretend to rape her lifeless body?
It doesn't appear to be that way. However,
you watched it?
I sure didn't. I done read the details of the tapes. So after they done pretend to be Tammy, she does. She
say, now let's take turns. I'll put on this here strap on. You like it in the ass every other way. You be Tammy. And then he's like,
She lets him beat her while he's raping her. Like, while he's... It's not really rape because she wants it, but he lets her beat on him. Or she lets him beat on her while he's having sex with her.
They were going to change turns.
Like, it's just... I get people have fantasies, but Jesus. Anyway, so the couple, now she moves out of her parents' house and they rent a little house in Port Tallahassee to allow Karla's parents to grieve with their other sister, Lori.
Well, turns out they got tired of trying to go down to Tammy's room and the door being locked. We just wanted to spend time in a room and see the things and, like, you know, the smells of somebody when they're gone. Not like the fart couch like of our Paul, but like they got tired of smelling Tammy's sweaty ass. Or not Tammy. What's the sister? Karla? Karla's sweaty ass.
Yeah. Well, shortly after Tammy's funeral, her parents
You can't tell me they didn't argue about stop having sex on your dead sister's bed. It's fucking disgusting. Get out. You know what? On second thought, just get out. You don't have the common sense enough to not have... Andrew, I'm telling you, that's the way it happened.
I'm telling you, her parents don't know because
and I'm telling you, it doesn't make sense to grieve one daughter and be like, you have to move out so we can finish our grieving in private. I think they were tired of hearing all the noise and the slap-ins going on in the basement. And we're like,
so they didn't kick him out.
I can't grieve like this.
But they didn't kick him out. Karla chose to move out.
She chose. It's like one of those when you you agree it's time for somebody to quit their job, kind of thing. We mutually agree this would be in the best interest of everyone if you guys would leave and go stop having sex on Tammy's bed.
I'm telling you that's not how it went.
I'm telling you that's how it went.
I'm telling you it's not, because they turn around and move her back in by
force. In my mind, this is how it happened. That's because they thought she'd break up with him.
Anyway.
And she'd be back after they changed the sheets.
That's not how it happened, but whatever. So shortly after her funeral and the parents left town because they just needed to get away, being in the house where they raised their daughter, it's super depressing. And I get it. Like, if I lived at Dad's house after he died, I'd need a change of pace. It still makes me sad driving past the house. But anyway, her sister Lori went to go stay with their grandparents, and that left the family home completely empty because Karla had moved out.
Who's Lori?
I told you in the beginning, it's Karla. It was Karla and her two sisters, Lori and Tammy.
How old is Lori?
I'm not sure how old Lori is. I would assume she's younger than...
So younger, but younger than Tammy?
I think so. But she went
Didn't
to go stay with...
Didn't you say this feller's a pedophile too?
His dad was a pedophile, but he's raping a 15-year-old, so he's right up there with her, or with him. Karla's family home is now empty. The weekend of January 12th, 1991, Paul abducted a young girl, took her to his grieving in-laws' vacant house, where he raped her while Karla cheered him on.
It's because Karla's hiney was sore from all the Tammy reenactment that they needed to stand in.
They sure did. But
apparently he likes it dry and she's chafed.
Or her ass. Well, whatever. I was going to say maybe... I was going to say... meant? Well, I was going to say if it's chafed and he likes it dry... If he likes it dry and her ass is chafed, it would be dry. So it would be the way he likes it. I was going to say her
naturally moistened all the time.
I was going to say her ass is probably bleeding and from all of the Tammy reenactments, and therefore it's too moist and he needs a drier butthole.
So, just so to be clear, being scabby is still dry.
I didn't say scabby. I said bleeding. Actively bleeding. Because I feel like being aggressively fucked in your ass is not going to feel good. Ever. What is wrong with you?
Jesus. But I'm just saying, even if your asshole is fucked raw and it's bloody, which is not funny at all.
It's only funny because I'm thinking of Karla, not the victims.
But it's... Yes, it's funny because it's Karla. Even if that were the case, eventually there'd be scabbing somewhere, and then it's not a moistened asshole. And I don't even think it counts as if your rectum is bleeding. That is not a lubricant. No, ma'am. So, anyway, they needed a stand-in because their extracurricular activities got a little rougher.
Yes, so anyway...
Things were wore out.
So they kidnap this girl. They rape her together. And Paul, drop her off on a deserted road near Lake Gibson. They nickname her the January Girl.
How old is she? They just say young?
Yes.
And they just drop her off and on a random road?
Yeah. I don't know how old she was. So she's described as a Jane Doe later. They're not sure who she was, how old she was. I can tell. We'll get back to her, okay? But on April 6th, 1991, Paul abducted a 14-year-old who was training for a local rowing team. The girl was distracted because someone had driven by that she recognized and she waved, which allowed Paul to jump out and drag her into the bushes near the rowing club. He raped her and made her lay there naked for 5 minutes after he's done raping her. A chance to run away. On June 7th, 1991, Karla invited a 15-year-old girl that she had met at a pet shop 2 years prior. She's known as Jane Doe when Karla goes to trial later. Jane Doe, because again, she was a minor. She goes into their home, and once in the home, Karla drugged Jane Doe, and both Karla and Paul sexually assaulted her and videotaped the assault.
Does this vet not keep inventory?
I guess not. And when Paul and Karla are done, they redress her. I don't know how this girl, like, nothing is said, but she doesn't die. She survives. And I guess when she comes to, she just gets up and leaves, but then comes back to their house in August because she was invited back, and the couple drugged her again. The girl vomited and stopped breathing while being raped. Paul finished up their raping, and then they called 911, but then they called while they were on the phone with the ambulance. They canceled it because Karla and Paul successfully resuscitated her, which made me seriously question if someone stops breathing and an ambulance is en route. I didn't realize you could cancel the ambulance because they came to. Don't you think that the paramedics would need to come check her out? Because there's obviously something going on. Yeah, obviously something's going on. So, but the ambulance is canceled. And in the early hours of June 15th, 1991, Paul was out looking to steal license plates because, remember, he's unemployed now. And
he
stumbled
needs
upon
some of them valid tags.
He sure do. But he stumbles upon Leslie McAfee. Leslie was a 14-year-old girl who was standing outside her home. She missed her curfew.
Can I point out that this is why he's not employed? Because he can't stay on task.
Well, she was standing outside her house because she missed her curfew and was locked out. But she missed curfew because she was attending a friend's wake.
The hell curfew was it? And what? What the fuck,
I don't
Andrea?
know. I know. And I had to say exactly that, what the fuck. Because, first of all, locking a 14-year-old out is already a what the fuck. But locking her out after she missed curfew from attending a wake? That's a what the fuck.
There's more to that.
And also locking a 14-year-old out when you know that there's a rapist going around the area, I feel like is also a what the fuck. So
now, I was going to throw our sister in this one as an example because I totally did lock her out when I was supposed to be watching her when Mom had gotten remarried and was on her honeymoon. But she was supposed to go with friends to drop somebody off at the airport, or I remember what she was supposed to be doing, or the family. No, it was his. I don't know. She was supposed to go to the airport with her boyfriend and his parents and come back. She left at like 1 p.m. At 11 o'clock, I locked that freaking door because her ass should have been back. She wasn't answering her phone, and frankly, it pissed me off, so I did put the chain over it. And I was charged with her safekeeping. However, I'm not going to get murdered while I'm waiting up for her either. So, certainly did fling that chain, and so... But she wasn't attending a wake either. However, it could be one of those cases of her ass was supposed to go to that wake earlier in the day, and maybe it wasn't a good friend. Maybe that friend died of a drug overdose, and the parents weren't too keen on the friend anyway. And then when she didn't show back up, they locked the door. So that wasn't necessarily locking her out. Her ass should have been home hours ago, and they just had to lock the house because I'm not sleeping with an unlocked door where there's a murderer and a rapist going around. So I stand behind locking out that bad girl.
They don't know about the murderings, so it's just a rapist.
They had to lock up their house. She knew what time they locked the house doors. She knew better. She should have had a plan.
Well,
unless she died, and then
she does. So anyway, Paul parks his car and strolls up to Leslie, and he told her that he wanted to break into her neighbor's house.
What?
Lucky for Paul, Leslie couldn't give a shit. She responded to his confession with asking him, You got any cigarettes? And Paul was all, I sure fucking do, but they're over yonder in my car. So
in the trunk.
They walk over to Paul's car.
Under that shovel.
He assaults her, blindfolds her, and shoves her into his car. He drove to his house where he and Karla were living and informed Karla that he done found them a victim to rape.
Karla and Paul was like, what about a license plate? Because that's what you were sent out to do. And I just got back from the grocery store and stealing things from the vet, and you had one task.
Well, if she's stealing things from the vet, it's for their victims. And it's in the wee hours of the morning, so I think she was at home just awaiting, preparing them their sex dungeon.
She was applying lubricant to her honey.
The Vaseline.
Or antibiotic ointment.
Hopefully she didn't double dip into that there Vaseline.
That's why he was no longer interested. He liked it dry. No, it's too moist with antibiotics. With the Neosporin.
Yeah. Karla and Paul videotaped themselves torturing and sexually abusing Leslie while they listened to Bob Marley and David Bowie.
What's with them videotaping it? I get it's I get it. People do that so they can relive it and watch their own homemade movies.
Yeah. Karla would burn the 14-year-old girl with cigarettes when Paul was away, just to fuck with this little girl. It's so
But
sick.
She's sedated during all of this, or they keep her awake for the torture?
She's awake. She's fully awake. They only sedated the sister because they thought that it would be... They didn't expect
So then she's
Tammy...
not still stealing the sedatives.
No. But I think with Tammy, it was an unintentional death because from what I gather, they were planning to just continuously drug her and let him have Tammy whenever he wanted. But because they overdosed her, she choked on her vomit and died. It was unexpected. So now it's just easier to go Paul's route of you just rape them and let them go and you're good to go. However, I think Karla, and I was going to save this till the end because but I think Karla is the crazy one, mainly because Paul has now shown a history of, he likes to be violent and rape people, but he has yet to kill anyone. Like, he's not torturing. Well, I know he's raping, but he's not torturing them. He's not, Karla is going intentionally inflicting additional pain other than the rapings on these girls. I think she's a bit crazy.
It's because she's sore.
At one point in the videotape, Paul tells Leslie, "You're doing a good job, Leslie. A damn good job. The next 2 hours are going to determine what I do to you. Right now, you're scoring perfect."
What's he doing when she was getting a perfect score?
Allowing him to rape her, I guess. I don't know. She wasn't fighting back. And as we've learned with Paul, he don't like when they flail and kick and scratch. They can cry and scream, but he doesn't like when he gets hit. On another section of the recording, Leslie's crying out in pain and begging Paul to please stop because he was violently sodomizing her while her hands were bound with twine and Karla was cheering him on. The following day, Paul claimed Karla fed Leslie a lethal dose of triazolam, but Karla claimed that Paul strangled her. Either way, they kill Leslie. They put Leslie's body in their basement, and later that afternoon, Karla's parents and her sister Lori come over to Paul's and Karla's house for dinner. So while her parents
still
are there,
in the basement,
they've got Leslie's dead body down in the basement. It's so gross. These people are disgusting. After Karla's family left, Paul and Karla decide the best way to dispose of the evidence would be to dismember Leslie. After chopping her into pieces, they submerge each part of her remains into concrete. Like, that's their plan. So Paul goes out, he buys dozens of bags of cement at the hardware store the next day, and he keeps the receipts, which doesn't help him when he goes to trial later.
He was going to use it as a business expense.
Sure
since
was.
he's employed with no one.
He says he's self-employed.
You
At
still
this
have to
point,
have a business.
I know, but he's claiming he's self-employed. Paul and Karla make several trips to dump the cement blocks into Lake Gibson, which is 11 miles south of where they're living.
I hope they
At
get
least
a flat tire.
At least one of the blocks weighed over 200 pounds or 90 kilograms. They
Does
were
their
not
drive
able
shaft shred?
They were not able to move the block into the water to sink it because you got to be
I'm
able to get it
surprised they
out
were
there to
able to
sink it.
put it in the car.
Well, I mean, 200 pounds between two people isn't that much.
But where did they mix the concrete? Outside in the backyard, and then they gotta heave it around somewhere? Like, it's also like an awkward thing.
I don't know how they done did it. I just know that they did it. But because they couldn't move the block into the water to sink it, they just left it near the shoreline, and it was found
Close enough.
It was found by Michael Duquette and his son Michael Jr. while they were out fishing on June 29th, 1991.
Did it look
Fun
like
fact,
a suspicious block of cement, or was there a shoe sticking out?
I'm not sure. I don't know what made it. I would assume that blood was mixed in with it at this point because I don't feel like these two are very great
smelled.
at what they're. Yeah. Fun fact though, June 29th, the day that Leslie's remains.
Just so we're clear, none of your facts are fun.
Yeah, I know it. That's why I like calling them fun facts just for you. But June 29th, the day that her remains were found, was Karla and Paul's wedding day. Their wedding was a fairy tale affair. It was complete with adoring family and friends, a horse-drawn carriage, and thousands of dollars in flowers. Eventually,
Who paid for that?
I don't know.
Because I don't see what parents would be like, sure am glad my daughter's marrying this unemployed bum that makes her waddle.
I'm sorry. It's not funny, but I can't help it.
She waddled down the aisle.
I'm not spoiling something later, but anyway. So Leslie's, once her remains are all found, her orthodontic appliance was how they were able to identify her eventually.
Her what?
Like whatever orthodontic appliance was in her mouth when they dismembered her. I guess it had a serial number, and that's how they were able to identify that it was Leslie's remains.
Her retainer?
Again, I don't know what it was. It's just referred to as orthodontic appliance.
I've never heard of an orthodontic appliance. It sounds like it needs to be plugged in.
You don't know. But anyway, so Leslie's remains were eventually identified. From July 20th.
Are you sure they didn't call it an apparatus?
I'm sure. So from July 28th, 1991 to August 9th, 1991, Paul stalked a 21-year-old woman. She spotted Paul following her yet again, and she drove to her boyfriend's house. The boyfriend comes out and chases after Paul's gold sedan, and boyfriend jotted down the license plate and they made a report to the police. An officer went out to officer ran the tags.
Hold up. Does it come back to a different vehicle? Because if he shops for tags around the neighborhood.
I don't know what he was doing with the tags, but it does come back to Paul's vehicle.
He didn't get any tags that one night he was supposed to be.
Yeah, true. And
he gets real distracted. And matter of fact, he could have been out shopping for more tags when he decided to stalk somebody. Real short attention span.
So I think you might be onto something. I think because he's driving around kidnapping people, he might be using the stolen tags, put them on his vehicle, and then when he's not out
trolling,
kidnapping people, he has his real tags on there. But when he was just stalking this chick, the boyfriend comes running out and he jots down the license plate. They report it to police. They run the tags. It pulls up Paul's address. Police go out there. They see the car parked in the driveway. They talk to Paul, but again, he's a nice guy. and police don't pursue the matter any further, nor did the officers submit an official report. So that shit slides. On November 30th, 1991, the remains of a 9th grade girl who'd been missing for nearly 6 months were found. The 14-year-old girl was Terry Anderson. She attended Lakeport Secondary School when she was abducted. Her body was found in the water of Port Dalhousie. I know I'm slaughtering that, but whatever. I done do my best. The coroner estimated Terry's body had been in the water for nearly 6 months. He said there was no evidence of foul play, which, again, she's 14 years old and found dead in the water. She was supposed to be going home from school. I question these coroners. The coroners ruled her death was drowning, most likely as a result of drinking beer and taking LSD. And before you ask, no, I don't know if she had a history of drinking and doing LSD, or if that was just a lazy way of reporting.
Well,
but Terry's
I would
death,
say if they had found that she was under the influence of things, that could be why they said she accidentally drowned, because not that I've done LSD, but apparently it can be wild and crazy and tripping like crazy and hallucinating, so she could have wandered off a pier and then been disoriented and drowned.
Well, her family do not agree with the coroner, so I think it was out of character for her, but the coroner just didn't know what to write, so they just wrote it off. But Terry's death is not linked to Paul and Karla's crimes because police say so, and that's why. The public...
They don't think it's foul play. They think a teenager did some drugs and it ended poorly.
But it's questioned to this day because it fits with their whole situation. In the afternoon of Thursday, April 16th, 1992, 9 months after Leslie's body had been found, Paul and Karla drove through St. Catharines to look for potential victims since school had let out and kids were walking home. As they drove past Holy Cross Secondary School, a Catholic high school, which, fun fact, it's adjacent to Lakeport Secondary School where Terry Anderson went missing from. So the 9th grader,
the
9th grader that they are saying they had no dealings with Paul and Karla. Yeah, that's where these people are scoping these kids out. But they spot 15-year-old Kristen French walking home. Kristen was an honor student and a good girl. She was walking quickly, just trying to get home. She was reliable. She got home. She took care of the dogs. She had a routine. But Karla and Paul pull up into a parking lot of a nearby church, and Karla got out of the car with a map in hand, pretending to be lost. When Kristen looked down at the map, Paul attacked her from behind. He forced her into the front seat of the car at knife point. From the back seat of the car, Karla restrained Kristen by pulling her hair. Meanwhile, when Kristen didn't arrive home, her parents became convinced that she had been met with foul play because she is consistently where she's supposed to be. So they call police. And within 24 hours, the Niagara Regional Police Service, the NRP, assemble a team and begin to search Kristen's usual route home. They find several witnesses. Several freaking witnesses who witnessed Kristen being abducted from different points of the street. Like, there's different people on this damn street that watched this girl get grabbed at knife point and shoved into a vehicle. And they end up providing the police with some details, like the color of the vehicle. It was cream or gold or beige or whatever. And then the police also found Kristen's shoe in the church parking lot. But prior to police contacting them, I don't think any of the witnesses contacted police, which is disgusting.
Right? How do you watch somebody get snatched and then, that happens?
It made me so mad when I read that, because it's like, what is wrong with people? This is a young girl. I'm not saying if she's older, they shouldn't say anything, but if it didn't seem right, you make a friggin' phone call, especially because they know what's going on in that area. They know there's a rapist, and now teenage girls are going missing and their bodies are being found. Like, you just witnessed this girl being kidnapped. It's not okay. Okay, April 16th, when she was kidnapped, the 19th was Easter. So it was Easter weekend that she was kidnapped.
Mm-hmm.
Throughout that day that she was kidnapped, Thursday, Friday, and Easter weekend, Paul and Karla videotaped themselves again, torturing, raping, and violently sodomizing Kristen. They forced her to drink large amounts of alcohol and tried to force her to be submissive to Paul. But she kicked, she bit, she spit, she tried to resist in any way she could. For 3 days, the couple abused her, videotaping the entire thing. At one point, Kristen looks at Karla and says, "You're going to kill me, but I'm going to be the reason you go down." Like, this girl fought. The following day, Karla beat Kristen with a rubber mallet because Kristen tried to escape.
That is, like, if I'm going to be beat with a mallet or a hammer, any of the things, I wouldn't want it to be a rubber mallet.
No.
It's like being beat to death with a phone book. It's got too much cushion. Just finish me off quick.
Yeah. Well, that's not how they were killing her. She was just beating her. Just torturing her.
I'm just saying, if I'm going to be hit with something, I'd rather it be one that's going to finish me off rather than just give me divots.
Well, Paul strangled Kristen for 7 minutes while Karla watched. Karla, whose hair was a mess because, beating somebody with a rubber mallet, made her hair fly everywhere. After they killed Kristen, she casually went to go fix her own hair, and then they left their house. Paul and Karla murdered Kristen before going to Karla's parents' house for Easter dinner.
What the fuck?
Kristen's naked body was discovered on April 30th, 1992, in a ditch in Burlington, about 45 minutes from St. Catharines and a short distance from the cemetery where Leslie was buried. She had been washed and her long, dark hair was cut off. They cut it to the scalp. Although it was thought that Kristen's hair was cut off as a trophy, Karla later testifies that it was cut off to try to slow identifying her body. Kristen also had cigarette burns all over her body, just like the 14-year-old Leslie's remains had. So police were confident that they had a serial killer. We're in 1992, right? By December, the Center of Forensic Sciences finally began testing the DNA samples that were provided from Paul 2 years prior. You know how these disgusting people get stopped? On December 27th, 1992, Paul beat the living shit out of Karla. He beat her not only with his hands, but with a flashlight. He left bruises all over her. When she returned to work on January 4th, 1993, she told coworkers that she was in an accident to try to explain the bruising, but they didn't believe her, so they contacted her parents, who drove over to her house and physically removed her from the home, which she was frantically searching for something. They didn't know what she was looking for, but she was looking for something. And then they drove her to the hospital, and she made a statement to police about being a battered spouse. Now, this is where I kind of chuckled, because while she did get the crap kicked out of her, she was allowing Paul to beat on her while he aggressively had sex with her. I think he tried to stick the flashlight in her, and when she refused, he beat her with it.
She's like, my asshole just now healed.
All his other beatings of her that she was okay with, he didn't use a weapon. And since it was all in good fun, I use that loosely, I think he tried
just
to
like
shove
her,
something. I think he tried to shove something in her, and when she refused him, it pissed him off, and so he beat her with it.
Yeah, and he didn't like the battle in backs, so
right. So she filed charges,
or either that, or he was tired of her fake participation, so he wanted her to really be a victim, because their last one fought back, and he probably liked it. So he wanted her to not be so compliant and enjoying it. That wasn't what tickled his fancy. And as we've seen, all people do is they escalate their crimes, because what made them all enjoying one thing it no longer has that same effect. So they need it to be more extreme and more extreme. So
I think that that's why, in my head, like, you know how you like to remember things go down in your brain hole a certain way. In my brain hole, he tried to shove that flashlight in one of her crevices, and she resisted, which turned him on, but he also beat the living shit out of her. And she's like, okay, well, this doesn't work for me.
Totally wouldn't have been the one to pick up that flashlight later. Just be like, does this smell like... Yeah, never mind. It's sticky.
Anyway, so because her parents are now involved and they take her to the hospital, she does file charges against him, and he was arrested and charged with assault with a weapon. He's released on his own recognizance with a court date pending. He leaves a suicide note, but a friend finds it and intervenes. Okay, so the DNA that they just tested a few weeks prior, they also, when they were at the hospital taking the report from Karla, they took DNA from her because, you know, if it's disposed of, they can take it. So they run that as well. The DNA on Kristen's body matched DNA taken from Karla while she was in the hospital. So not only did this woman that's in the hospital who just been beaten by her husband, her DNA matches a murder victim.
I already see the way this is going to go, though, because she can just say he forced her to participate this whole time because she feared the beatings.
Yeah, the DNA from Kristen not only matched Karla and tied her into that murder, but the Scarborough Rapist victims matched the DNA that Paul had given 2 years prior. So now they know who's done all those rapes before him and Karla were together. But now they've got Karla's DNA on one of the murder victims. So this case just got blown wide open for police.
Just like
police put him under 24-hour surveillance. They bring Karla in on February 9th, 1993, and tell her they suspect Paul of being the Scarborough Rapist. Kind of see how she'd react. This narcissist bully only wanted to talk about the abuse that he had done to her. I think, like you just said, she's lining up her defense.
Mm-hmm.
However, that night, she confessed to her aunt and uncle, because she was staying with them at this point, that she was actually a part of the rapes and murders of 2 young girls, and it was videotaped.
Yeah, I was going to say, just wait till their home movies turn up. Can I just say, I feel bad for the people who have to watch those. Like, when they find, like, decades worth of videotapes, somebody's got to sit there and comb through evidence.
And also the jury. Because I can tell you that the jury has to sit and watch hundreds of hours of these 2's tapes. But we'll get to that. So the aunt and uncle, they help her by advising her to go to an attorney who works out a deal with prosecutors in exchange for immunity. She'll tell police everything. And they have nothing
for no
else.
Time or
for a reduced sentence. And like immunity
of no,
the murders. The deal they worked out, we're getting to it, but she also claims that she's a battered spouse and an unwilling accomplice to all his crimes. So prosecutors are like, sure, the more evidence we can have against this piece of garbage, the better. So they make a deal with Karla. She's black and blue. I have pictures of her black eyes. It's insane. And she agrees to testify.
As long as you don't have one of her brown eye.
Gross. So the deal that prosecutors made was Karla would testify against Paul on everything that she's aware of, and she would plead guilty to manslaughter. So that's the agreement. She signs off on it. She tells them everything, that there's tapes of the murders and the rapes, and police issue a search warrant, but they only find one tape when they go out.
Tammy.
And it was of Karla forcefully performing oral sex on the Jane Doe. So the only tape they find is of her. So they're like, yeah, so I don't know where all these other tapes are, but we only found this one and it's of you. But she'd already signed that agreement. She was willing to testify against Paul. She was sentenced to 12 years in prison, which caused public outrage because the punishment was seen as super lenient.
It was.
As part of the outrage, though, was caused after police found the rest of the videotapes of all the assaults. Every assault was recorded, hundreds of hours. You know how they found him? Because originally they didn't find him, right? Paul ends up having 2 lawyers. The first lawyer, Paul called him from jail and said, okay, so there's some tapes that I hid. Police didn't find it. I don't know why he felt the need to confess it, but he did. He told the attorney, you're bound by attorney-client privilege, right? Attorney's like, sure. He says, go into my house. Hidden in the ceiling light fixture in the upstairs bathroom are the tapes. The lawyer goes into the house and takes the tapes. And he hid them from police. I don't know where that falls.
Yeah, I was going to say, I feel like that's not legal.
I feel like it's a form of tampering with evidence because there was literally a warrant that was issued in search of those tapes specifically, and you went and found them, and now you're hiding them. I'm not sure what happens next. I don't know if that attorney watches the tapes or just the fact that he knows he tampered with evidence and he's got some kind of conscience and was like, eh. But he resigns as Paul's attorney. He later claims he watched the tapes and says that he could no longer represent him because he's a monster. So Paul hires another attorney. Attorney 1 hands these tapes over to Attorney 2. Attorney 2 looks at these tapes and thankfully gives the tapes to police. Now, like I said, Karla and Paul recorded themselves raping and torturing all these girls. Some of them are unidentified. So they are Jane Does. Prosecutors saw that Karla was very much a willing participant in all of these heinous crimes. But nonetheless, Karla was already sentenced to her 12 years with her immunity deal.
Did they know Canadian about the sister, though? Because...
They do. They find the tape. Canadian press called the deal Karla made with prosecutors the deal with the devil. And like I said earlier, I don't think she answered that psychopathy test, honestly, because she's a freaking nut job. And
either that or she's smarter than they realize and she knew the answers they were looking for.
She also has a degree in psychology. So I feel like it was very easy for her to answer those questions, knowing the correct way to answer them. But on February 25th, 1994, Karla is granted the divorce she filed for based on physical and mental cruelty. And then Karla, in 1995, testified against Paul for 17 days. That's a long time to sit there and testify against somebody. That's a long time. And by September of 1995, Paul received 2 life sentences without the possibility of parole until February 17th, 2018. They also labeled him as a violent offender, likely to repeat his crimes.
Did he get out?
Karla served her 12 years and was unconditionally released on July 4th, 2005. She went on to try to stop the media from discussing her violent past because she claims she's not a threat to anyone. Get this one. When I was telling Jason about this case, this made him wide-eyed and stare at me like, what the hell? She marries her attorney's brother. Right?
He liked what he saw.
Apparently. He heard she liked it in the honey. Thierry Bordalis, she married him in 2007. Later in 2007, she gave birth to a baby boy, but when she was at the hospital in labor, several nurses refused to care for her because they knew of her criminal history. So Karla and Thierry move away with their son. He was almost 1 year old because they were trying to have a normal life. By 2012, she and Thierry had 3 children. They had another boy and 1 little girl. On October 17th, 2014, a jury in the murder trial of Luca Magnotta heard that Karla was back living in Quebec because Luca, he's a weirdo, and I might make that a case for another day because it led me to opening that can of worms, and I was like, holy shit, this guy's crazy. But he claimed that he was dating Karla. even though it was retracted, and he was like, no, I didn't date her. I simply admire her and Paul's murderous acts and consider them my role models. Him bringing her name up put her back in the face of the media, and we know how the media works. They basically recap all of her shenanigans, and that put her face and her name in the local news. And then parents recognized her picture and her name, and they freaked the fuck out, rightfully so, because she'd been volunteering at her children's school with their kids. And it's like, I get it, because she helped her husband prey on young girls.
Yeah. And her
But
sister.
by January, yeah, your sister. But by January 2020, it's reported that she was living in, I'm going to slaughter this, but Salisbury Day Valleyfield without her husband and without her children. So I'm guessing it just became too much and they separated. Paul, on the other hand, so remember I said he done received him a life sentence?
Mm-hmm.
Paul ended up serving the majority of his 30 years in prison up to that point in solitary confinement following an attack by a group of inmates that beat the crap out of him and nearly killed him. In 2013, he began, I don't even know how to say this, but he began dating or corresponding with a whack job. And in 2014, they became engaged. She's a 30-year-old blonde with low self-esteem, and she didn't tell anyone that she knew, like in her inner circle, about her engagement to Paul. She just planned to marry him and then tell her friends and family. Right? But he just looked forward to those conjugal visits. I guess he prefers the non-hairy buttholes to the option of, and with the option of another hole.
I just like to think that he was taking it.
Yeah, well, he done wanted a different hole to put it in, I guess. But I don't know what happened with all that. I really could care less, because I think she's batshit crazy. And the news article that I got that from, it was those reporters in the news article that contacted her parents and were like, how do you feel about your 30-year-old daughter being engaged to a serial rapist and killer? And they were like, wait, what? That was a mess. But like I said, he was eligible in 2018 for parole and thankfully was denied release. In 2021, at 58 years old, he failed to receive parole again. He has been declared a dangerous offender, meaning, thankfully, in Canada, when you are labeled a dangerous repeat offender, he will most likely spend the rest of his life in prison. Not guaranteed, but most likely, because he carried on for so long and really had no remorse and enjoyed watching himself rape these girls on tape and everything. He's not going to get out. But my final fun fact, Claire, is when they, served that warrant, went into his house, and Paul, being the semi-hoarder that he is, he collects like the newspaper clippings and things. They found a newspaper clipping during that police search that described a rape that occurred in Hawaii during the couple's honeymoon when they were there in the summer of 1991. The article, when they spell it all out, the rape is similar to Paul's other rapes, and that led Hawaii and the US and Canada just to believe that Paul was the rapist. It was never prosecuted due to extradition issues and, between Canada and the US. And I realize Hawaii is part of the US, but it's separated enough to where they've got kind of like their own world going on. But she is out. He is in jail. And
hold up. He's in Canada.
Yeah. What about it?
You said that he wouldn't be extradited because it's part of the US.
Hawaii.
Right.
They would have to bring him from Canada to the US to try him for the rape of that girl when he was there for his... Yeah. And because of extradition issues, and he's supposed to spend his life in prison, the US was just like, it was him. Yeah. Keep him. Yeah. We don't want him. It's not worth the money. Our prisons
are already full, and he don't need to go on a trip to Hawaii.
Yup.
Thank you for listening to Homicide Hobbies. I'm Claire.
I'm Andy.
Follow us each week to get your fix of the atrocities that occur in true crime. And don't forget to tell people about us and rate us if you like us. But don't rate us if you didn't. Just change the channel.